Greetings, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here for the third episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon. This is a cartoon celebration of the 50th anniversary of the game Dungeons and Dragons, which I've been lucky enough to both play for most of those 50 years and to work on professionally for a good part of my career. Uh, if this is your first show, hey, thanks for joining in. Glad to have you. If you're back again, welcome. So good to see you back. Hope you'll join us again in future shows. Tonight, I've got a very special guest and friend of mine, Mr. Stephen D. Sullivan. We'll be introduced to him in a second. Just want to say, to begin with, that if you are enjoying this and you want to get involved more, the best place to do that is over on the come on, open up. There we go. There is a Substack. 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. It's a free newsletter where I'm going to be getting previews for upcoming shows, where I'll post the art that we do in the shows and some other behind the scenes stuff. There's, let's say, a free newsletter. There are paid levels, which have some rewards attached to them. You can find out the details by going there. I don't want to bore you too much with that to begin with. Wait till the end of the show. I'll bore you then. But for now, just so we don't wind up wasting too much time listening to me blather, I'm going to invite Steve Sullivan in. So while you're at home, wherever on the couch, shake your drinks, clap your hands, make some noise for Steve Sullivan. Steve, thank you very much for joining us here.
Hey Stan, it's great to be here. Always great to see you. Stan
Um,
and I are old buddies. We're old comrades in war from
that,
TSR and other things.
yes, I mean we both worked at TSR, not together, but we've worked on projects together in the grand scheme. We both wrote novels for the uh, Legend of the Five Rings series,
Yep,
and we both spent our time working on the Dragonlance, and
yep,
we're in a writers group together. So
yes.
Steve and I
So we
go.
actually see each other relatively frequently on Zoom, though we're about 2,000 miles apart.
Yeah, yeah. Hi, Riley. Hi, Cayman. I'm guessing that's Kerry, Cayman, and Ricardo, and Dale, and Linnea. Ooh, we got a. You're a popular guy, Steve. You're bringing all the peeps in.
That's awesome. I,
All
I
right,
even know at least one of them.
I know. Actually, they're friends of mine, but that's okay. They're excited to see you. So, just to begin with, because most of the people here don't know you as well as I do, why don't you give us just a quick kind of summation, the kind of convention intro? Who is Steve Sullivan?
I am an author, an artist, and occasionally game designer and editor. And I've been working professionally on D&D, not counting my contest wins, since 1980, and a few years before that. And back in the really ancient days, when I first started playing, my teaching partner Marty Serkin and I were the first people to teach D&D at a college level. We taught a course on D&D at the MIT's. Uh, what do they call it? It was college for high school students kind of thing. And Marty and I ran a D&D course back in
Wow.
the days.
When was that?
I think it was about 78. It's a long time ago now. It was so long ago that we would go to the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab the night before sometimes, and we would play Zork. And you could only play Zork late at night in the Artificial Intelligence Lab because three or four people playing Zork would use the entire computing power of MIT at the time, if you can imagine. So we
Right.
would stay up all night and drink Coca-Cola and eat Oreos, and then tumble out of the AI lab and teach our courses in the morning before heading home in the afternoon. It was fun.
And trying to imagine Zork taking up all of the computing resources of MIT.
It was, and it was such a big deal that there was the floor below where we were playing that was entirely occupied by the CIA because they
Okay.
wanted to see MIT with computers. So I probably have a file there somewhere Maybe someday I'll do a Freedom of Information Act. Anyway, I've been playing D&D for a long time and working with it for a long time.
Uh,
And I've also written a ton of books. It's getting close to 100 books, I think, if you count anthologies now, including the Legend of the Five Rings and the kids adaptation of the first Iron Man, and a bunch of stuff of my own. Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors, fairly recently, and Manos, the Hands of Fate,
Manos, the Heads of
which I
Fate.
which I won the. I beat out a Star Wars book, a Batman book, and the adaptation of Crimson Peak the year Manos came out for the best tie-in written book in all the world that year. So I'm pretty happy about that since I was the publisher as well. It was like, yay, take that, Goliath.
Um, all right. So one of the other things that is a conceit of this show, and you and I were talking about this earlier, is that I'm going to be doing some drawing while we talk, and I've been picking a piece of art from each episode is 1 year further along the 50-year timeline for D&D. So this year
Cool.
is 1975. We're still in that era when there's not a lot going on. There's not a lot that came out in 1975. But one very important piece that came out was the Greyhawk book, the original
Right.
Greyhawk Supplement. And at first I thought I was going to draw this cover image with the beholder. But the beholder just is, he looks like the, what was the meme, the orange with the face? That was a meme a
Oh,
couple of
I don't know.
he looks like that. I was like, I
He
just
looks
don't
like
know
he
about
was drawn with a protractor, though, or something.
it.
He's very
Yeah.
round.
And he looks pretty bored.
Right, but
Uh,
yet the crazy thing is, back in these days, this art was really exciting, as
yeah,
as old and kind of amateurish as it looks to a lot of us now. Of course, I was doing very amateurish drawing back in those days too, but it was really exciting to page through these old books, the little books like this one, and see the art inside. And sometimes there'd be something unexpectedly great. But even this, it's like, ooh, the beholder, and everyone loves the beholder,
oh,
right
when
from the
it's new, it's exciting.
exactly. Exactly.
Um,
And Dale's right. I'm probably also on the government list for
yeah.
the Loom Panics catalog back when that company exists.
Riley
They had
says
a spot in my
annoying,
library.
annoying orange. Yes, that's the annoying
The
orange.
annoying orange.
You have to look
I
it up
know
after
I'm
the show.
OG and that kind of stuff. Sometimes memes just go right by me.
Well, so I was thinking about doing that, and then I was flipping through this book, and I realized just looking at the cover that there's something else on this cover that was interesting and worth doing, and that is this little uh, lizard man who was the
The
logo
Lizard Man.
in 1975 only. But the lizard man is the logo, and he's also a uh, a full illustration. So that's what I'm going to be using as my reference for my drawing tonight. A
That's awesome. I love that Lizard Man. That is one of my
lot
favorite
of people
TSR
have.
representative moments.
So that's what I'm going to try and get drawn. I guess maybe, before we start here, let me come back and say last week I did the the cover image from the original box set. I did the come on, there it is. I did my version of the warrior on the horse, and we had some interesting
Nice.
conversations about just kind of the both the horse and the warrior. When you zoom in, they both looked very surprised. I mean, you don't think about it, but in that image, the rider was too big for the horse, and they both and he looks like he's fallen off. So that's what I got out of that. One thing I didn't, I finished this off screen. Those of you who watched last week, here's the finished version of what we were working on. When it was all done, I thought about the fact that it was black and white. So I went back in and also gave a try on what it would look like if I just did it kind of monotone. I,
Oh, that's very old school.
Yeah, I think that's closer to what was on the box, but I think in the end, I like this one better. So that's what I'm going to be doing with the Lizard Man today. And since we've only got about an hour, I'm not going to waste any time. I need as much time as I can get. Let me get ready
Dale
here with
asked
that.
who did that Lizard Man, who was the artist on that, and
Uh,
I don't remember. I think it's Dak, maybe,
I
but I don't
think
remember
it's
what Dak stands
also
for.
also Bell, the guy, same guy that did the other one.
Oh,
I
it
think.
could be Bell. Yeah,
Um,
they're people that I don't know. They were whatever association they had with TSR were gone by the time I got there.
yeah, I'm
No, I know.
looking at the original. The it's signed by Bell. So
Is it cool?
yep.
That's a nice
All
piece.
right. So I'm going to come over here and set up. In the meanwhile, let's turn to you and your like we're looking at 1975, beginnings of D&D. Clearly, you weren't on staff yet,
No,
but were had you discovered D&D that early? I mean, that's very close to the beginning.
I think I had, but I'm not entirely sure. There was a D&D group at my high school very early, at least a year before I started playing. Maybe, and I started playing in literally January 1, 1977 is the day that I mark as my starting to play the game. I don't remember if I played it that day or started working on my world or both because it's so long ago now. But it was definitely, I had kind of prepped before that leading up to it. And then January 1, 77, I started playing. But before that, people had been playing at my school. And at the time, I was a Tolkien purist. And that means if it wasn't from Tolkien, it shouldn't be pretending to be Tolkien in any way, shape, or form. And this is back in the days when you had Balrogs and hobbits and stuff in D&D, and there was a group playing, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that looks kind of interesting." I remember I even sat in on a session after school, and this was pre Satanic Panic. Was I was at TSR for that. It was pre Satanic Panic, and so there wasn't even any question of whether there could be a D&D group after school. I sat in on a session. I remember someone I knew using Boots of Speed at the time, and I thought, well, this is kind of interesting and strange, but it's also blasphemy against Tolkien. so
It's just a
so I
different.
didn't play it for maybe from 75 right up until 77 because as I said that's so long ago that I it's hard to say, oh yeah, I remember when Mark Campbell and Andy Guinness were playing D&D back in 1975, 76. It could have even been as early as 74 because I came from a small suburb of Boston called Sharon, which had a really good school system, and a lot of people went from Sharon to Harvard and MIT and Caltech and kind of the big institutions of learning. So it was a very progressive school system, and there were a lot of people that were gaming there. There were a lot of uh, people played chess a lot. There was a very good a math team, which is something I never participated in because I'm more of a storyteller than a math person. But I knew people on all of these things. Anyway, it was a very bright school system to grow up in, and so D&D got there fast. Someone either went to Origins or maybe even Gen Con and picked it up, or possibly just got it from Cambridge because there was a great game shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts called Games People Play. That was run by a woman named Carol, who always seemed a little disdainful of all these weirdos coming into her store to buy D&D books. She was happy to sell you the books and the dice, though. Anyway, that it was a great place to go and be, and if you were into going into the big city, which was not that far away from where we all grew up. it was easy to find D&D back in the day.
That's
So
funny.
go ahead.
I say that's funny. We were talking last week when I had Jeff Grubb and Steve Winter on, and we were talking about how hard it was to find D&D uh, if you weren't somewhere that had a good game shop like you're talking about. And almost always, one of the things we were talking about, game shops at that time usually meant something that was selling model trains. Right? There wasn't a game shop. Like there wasn't that specialized in board games. It was is puzzles or sewing, or most often, in fact, we all agreed in where we were, they were model train shops that also had other hobbies like kite building and model rocketry, and they were the ones that had gotten it. But it was always a
Games
slog to
People
find
Play
them.
was not that.
One of
Games
the
People
first
Play
people
had
I've ever met from that era that says it was easy to find.
Right. Well, if you knew where Games People Play was, and it was halfway between the Orson Welles Cinema and Harvard Square, and the Orson Welles Cinema is down near MIT. So it's between MIT and Harvard, basically. So if you were in that area of the city at all, it was hard to miss. It was on the upper level of a two-level plaza. Part of the lower level was partly below street, and it had a great used record store in it. And then the game shop was above that, along with a number of other little shops. It wasn't like a huge, sprawling hardware store that a lot of the train shops and that kind of stuff was. It was
Mm,
it was kind of a small boutique game store that was likely to have, you know, uh, wooden puzzles, not picture puzzles, but wooden puzzles and puzzle boxes. I have somewhere in my collection. I have it looks like a wristwatch, but or a pocket watch, but when you open it up, it has a complete replica of Stonehenge in it to tell the time with, right? It was
nice.
that kind of a store. It had the things that would float in the air because there were magnets, or they would circle around perpetually. It had those kind of amusing things. It had the silver balls that would clack together. It had a lot of things that were tactile and motion oriented, as well as kind of higher end games. And that included, by the time I was up in teaching in MIT, it had a very complete kind of set of everything that was state of the art role playing games. So they had Tunnels and Trolls, and they had the Fantasy Trip, and they had the Fantasy Trip. I remember getting those one by one as they were released at that store. It was a terrific game store, and Carol, she stocked great stuff, but she never was quite sure she liked any of us. But there was another guy there that was into the SCA, and he carried a Bowie knife and stuff because it's the '70s. You could do that kind of stuff. And he was the if Carol wasn't there, this guy, his name might have been Rob, was there, and yeah, he was into it.
So
So
what was the first product you remember getting for D&D?
well,
Did you get the original brown box?
I did not get the original brown box. The other thing to remember about this time is that the books were not cheap comparatively for the time. This was an age where comic books were 40 cents, maybe, right? It was that era, and the box was, I think it might have been $20, which, when you could ride into Boston for a buck and a quarter or something like that, including the bus and the train, $20 was a lot of dough. But it was also the era of sudden cheap photocopying in the in the world of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and there was a place right down the street from Games People Play that was called Gnomon Copy, spelled Gnomon,
Mm.
which is a printing term, and you could photocopy all the books for for well under $5. So my first D&D set is an original set with the Balrogs and the Hobbits and stuff in photocopy form. The first one I remember, I think the first one I bought may have been Eldritch Wizardry, but I had photocopies of the others, and then I went back and bought the others as well, eventually. So yeah, I think Eldritch Wizardry may have been the first one that I bought,
All
because
right.
that was when okay, photocopies are no longer good. I have to have the newest thing absolutely as it comes out, and then of course the monster manual was a huge step forward, and then by the time the DMG rolled around, I had been uh, I had started to send letters and stuff into TSR, and I actually one of the reasons I probably got my job in 1980 was that I had placed third in their Draw the Monster contest and then second in their dungeon design contest in Dragon magazine way back in the day. And so that
That's
when I sent them my resume and stuff, those were prominent.
I would say now makes two distinct things I want to talk about because I still like to hear a little bit more about the first playing. Right, you say you had a school. You mentioned the Satanic Panic, which maybe a lot of some people watching don't know what that is. We'll talk about that when we get to the early '80s. But you had a club at your high school that you were playing D&D at. How
There was a club at the high school, but I never played D&D at the D&D club. I watched D&D at the
okay.
D&D club. I have one of these weird origin stories that people, you know, I'm the guy that doesn't have the story everyone else has because I started playing D&D to meet girls. And the story behind that,
It's cool.
is our and I'd spent a reasonable amount of time hanging out with sci-fi girls and stuff in the school. There was at one point a science fiction club, so met some early girlfriends there. There was one of the dungeon masters at my school had a sister who was a player as well as, and she designed weird dungeons based on the New York subway system, stuff like that. So this gal's name was Faith, and I really wanted to maybe start going out with Faith, and it turned out that the easiest way I could see to do that was to actually start playing D&D. So screw that Tolkien purist stuff. I want to hang out with this girl, and if I have to play D&D to do that, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what I did. And
And
she and
lo
I
and
went out.
behold, you got a career out of it.
I got a career out of it. I got a girlfriend out of it. I got a number of girlfriends out of it. All my best girlfriends were gamers, including my wife, who's I think my wife's been playing since '79. And weirdly or fittingly, she went to college with that same guy whose sister I was anxious to date. And so I ended up meeting my wife through that same D&D connection. And she's been playing since 78 or 79, almost as long as I have. So
You're right.
yeah.
You are the weird one.
No, I totally. And I'm still in touch with most of these women. Yeah, so I got very lucky with D&D and dating girls. Yes. Yes, Becky Mayer. I started playing D&D to meet girls. And it totally worked for me. And it wasn't unusual to have women gamers out where I grew up, and I know that's kind of a weird thing to even say, but it just wasn't that
Well,
strange,
I
So
mean, I'll
I
tell
went
you,
from one
it's another thing.
gamer girl to play.
Jeff said a similar thing when he was on when we were talking last week. It's we had an early era. I think you hit the nail on the head in one of the things you said there. The connection between sci-fi and early D&D, that the sci-fi um, fandom was very uh, evenly split gender wise. In fact, it might even where I was might have even been more women than men. Right.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
So
the
you You say you won a couple of design contests through Dragon. You were an early subscriber to Dragon magazine. I take it.
Yep, yeah. Dragon Magazine was another one of those things that was up there in the games people play. In fact, the guy that introduced me to the game had Dragon Magazine #1, and I think I started picking it up. I don't know, maybe 12, 14, somewhere. It was like the Green Magician issues, whichever ones those are. So very early on. Yeah, and then I started subscribing to it, and uh, and they would occasionally they'd run these ads, in addition to trying to sell you the coolest new books and having interesting articles and that kind of stuff. Back in the late 70s, they started advertising for people that they needed people in the design, editorial, and art departments, but they called editorial production at that time. And I applied, I think, in the spring of 1980, which, if memory serves, is around, it may have been the hire that they hired Frank Menser at, and possibly
Mm-hmm.
Zeb. And and then and I didn't make the cut then. And then they were hiring again in the summer that year, and they got in, they got in touch with me. I'd had God bless her forever. My dad's secretary. I wrote up my resume and resent it in along with all the whatever stuff was required. And my dad's secretary, Elaine, worked at the college I was attending, and where my dad also worked. And she was like, "Let me retype that for you," because I was a two-finger typist, right? I'd written an entire D&D module typing two fingers. And when I got there, I found out that that was not unique at all. No one at TSR, there was one guy at TSR on the entire creative floor, the third floor of the old Dungeon Hobby Shop building. One guy actually knew how to touch type. The rest of us were all hunt and peck. Anyway, Elaine retyped that, took it from probably a pretty crappy looking resume into this beautiful, well formatted, professionally typed, no errors at all format, and sent it in. And that was enough to get them to get in touch with me and say, "Hey, we're interested in maybe talking to you about a job out here." And as coincidence would have it, I was going out there for my second Gen Con, which was, I went in 79, and then this was 1980. And I said, "Well, hey, I'm going to be there in 2 weeks." And they were like, "Great." And we set up a time and a place where we are going to get together and meet, and uh, and then I would be interviewed. And as it turned out, I was interviewing for a position in Harold Johnson's department. Lawrence Schick was the head of the whole creative division at the time, and I met Lawrence. And Lawrence and I spent my entire interview walking through Parkside in Kenosha, Wisconsin, looking for Harold Johnson, and we never actually found him because they'd scheduled it. Harold has an excuse. It was like, well, they scheduled it when I was in the middle of running a game or whatever the hell it was. In any case, he never showed up. But Lawrence apparently liked what he saw enough that that they made me a job offer then, which was another. That's also the convention at which my wife and I started dating, because as it's almost like the D&D gods were looking after me at the time. She and I had met early in the spring when she'd come to visit my other friend, and her parents lived a mile, maybe 2 miles from Parkside, where Gen Con was being held.
Yeah.
So the bunch of us that were going out, since my friend that introduced us was among them, her folks said, "Well, just stay at our house. We've got a camper. We've got floors. You bring sleeping bags. Stay at our house." God bless her and all that. So, and Kiff was going to go to the convention as well. So we stayed at her house, and then through more circumstances, she was supposed to go back east and stay at my friend's house. But my friend he flew back for a reason that's obscure to me now. and we couldn't manage to get in touch with him for long enough that she ended up staying at my house, and we've been together ever since. So it was a very good week for me.
Let's just say that's a tough week to beat.
Yeah, because we'd driven out, and I got back. We drove back straight through. I don't think we stopped. And it's about a 24-hour drive, or it was back then. It's a little shorter now with the higher speed limits. And I literally got to my house, figured we couldn't find this other guy, had put Kiff up in a room at the house, lay down in my bed, and the phone rang maybe an hour or two after I'd gotten home, and it was Lawrence.
Hmm.
And I said, "Hey, this is Lawrence Schick." I was like, "Oh, hi, Lawrence. I just got back from Gen Con." He was like, "Well, how soon can you get back here?" To which I said, "Oh, how soon do you want me?"
Hmm.
And just a couple of weeks later, on 5 days after my 21st birthday, I was working at TSR in September of 1980, and
Wow.
that is
All right. So that's yeah,
the
that's an
origin
amazing
story.
origin story. So you get out there, 1980. What were you working on when you got out there? What are some of the first things that had your fingerprints on them?
Well, the first thing we did, I was hired the same day as John Pickens, who later became the oldest surviving employee at TSR. We were hired in around 95, I think was my employee number. John was either 94 or 96, I don't know. And I've always thought he was 96, but he may have had the higher number. And he survived long enough to work his way up to number one on seniority.
Hmm.
But God bless him. John is a great and dedicated guy. He and I, the first thing we were doing was they were adding staff, and they realized they had no standards for how to do anything. So under the guise of
They
teaching
still don't
John
have
and
that
me,
great a standard.
under the guise of teaching John and me about publishing and how to do these things. Oh, I'd worked on my college newspaper, and my family was in publishing when I was a very young child, so I had some experience. Um, we created a style book for TSR and for its games and that kind of stuff, and that involved both. Mostly, it was just basic editing things, like we're using the serial comma and we're whatever. So we did that. That lasted at least a couple of days, but then they were really pressed for time, so we very quickly got into editing things. One of the first things I edited was A3 for the what's the Undercity series, which weirdly enough, or fittingly enough, I had actually played in the D&D tournament at Gen Con that year, and our team had advanced farther than any other team in the tournament in the semifinal rounds, but been disqualified because they had a terrible scoring system that said you you only got the points if you survived. So all of the people that got to room 3 but no one died would go ahead of those of us that got to room 9 with one casualty, and then all got killed by the illusionist pretending to be Demogorgon at that point.
Hmm.
So I ended up editing that particular module by Alan Hammock, and one of the first things I did was convince Al, Al, this scoring system doesn't work, and here's why. So I got to fix that and I worked on the Slay of Pits of the Undercity series then, and then after that, Al and I did the Ghost Tower of Inverness together as well, and then I worked on just almost everything they were putting out then. I was not maybe the best proofreader, but I was a very good and fast developmental editor. And I also had skill in copywriting that I'd learned in a media and journalism class in high school. And so I ended up writing the back cover copy for like the first Boot Hill module, the first Top Secret module, the D&D modules that were coming out at the time. We worked on Basic and Expert. We were the editorial team on that. I wrote the back cover for copy for those. I nearly got fired because I wrote out the word Um, and I just ended up doing a lot of stuff. I edited the first Top Secret module. I edited the second edition of Top Secret, which was mostly a retypesetting thing. Eventually, I was one of the U.S. editors on Fiendfolio, and my name's not on that for a variety of reasons. I worked on, in the relatively short time I was in editorial, which was then called production, I worked on almost everything. A bunch of the mini games, just anything that was there. I was either the key editor, or often I was like the second editor. I would come in and help John Pickens or Ed Sollers or Pat Price or later Steve Winter or something. I ended up kind of doing a lot of stuff and had a great time. And left Bill Willingham's name off a couple of things accidentally, which I said, next time, Bill, I do that, I will leave my name off whatever it is, the next thing I work on. And as it turned out, as I made that vow to him, I'd already left him off of another product. And that's why my name is not on the Fiendfolio, though Al Hamnick and I are the American editors
I was
on
going
the
to
Fiend.
ask because it sounded like there was a story there.
Yep, yep, and that is the story. The story is I made a vow to Bill Willingham, and that was the product that it came up on. And there was also, we weren't super pleased with the Fiendfolio because we couldn't really fix anything because it came to us from England completely typeset. And so Alan and I could only change things that we were thought were like the carbuncle. When it lost the gem from the middle of its forehead, it would cry. And so there were things like that that just seemed very non D&D to us that we ended up fixing. We
It
fixed some
would
stuff with it.
cry.
It would cry. It would cry. It would shed just. It wasn't like golden tears or tears that would turn you into stone or tears that were deadly poison or anything like that. It just cried. So there was some stuff that was like, okay, this maybe is not the worst product to leave my name off of, but at the time I had no way of knowing that
Right.
because of office politics, that actually would be the only hardback book that I worked on as an editor. So,
I'm gonna pause in my drawing for a second because I see we got a whole bunch going on in the chat. I see Lala is here. Thanks for coming, Lala. Always good to see you, Becky. We've been chatting a bit. I'm glad to see you here. Heath Farndon.
oh, Heath from
Hey, Heath.
Australia! Holy crap!
Good day,
Yeah,
Heath. Oh, yeah. If this is gonna make
yeah,
him
I
run away
wasn't
like
seeing
me
any
doing
of
a
that. I
bad
was
Australian
concentrating on
accent.
getting my stories right, getting my stories right here.
um, Heath says he's pretty sure the original wood grain and white boxes were $10 and supplements were $5. Um,
He could be right.
which
It
is my
seemed
memory.
like
But
a
even then,
lot of money at the time.
$10 was like $20 back then, right? Spending
Right.
$10
It's
on
gotta be.
something was a crazy. What? $10 on a game?
It might have been 15 by the time I get. It was a lot of money. I mean, that
Yeah.
was literally 50 comic books, or like 3 tanks of gas, 4 tanks of gas, because gas was like 40 cents or 50
Well,
cents a
yeah.
gallon or
Well,
whatever. It was,
to make
so it was
talk about making someone cry. So let's talk about that. Oh, Becky says Steve
for
Gold's
school
sister.
kids,
Oh,
it was
Steve
quite a
Gold's
lot of.
sister. Hi, Becky. I haven't seen you since 1985. Good to see you again. Say hi to Steve for me.
Oh,
Um.
wow, cool.
So yeah. No, I love talking to you guys who were there really early about. Uh, in part, just because it makes me feel good about the fact that we still were when we were as a kind of, well, we don't have a style guide. Yeah, my when I came in, they hired me,
You
and
didn't have a
not
style
only
guide because I was no longer an editor. I'll tell you that. I
well
ended up
because the
doing.
style guide got changed, and then so the old one couldn't do, but the new one wasn't. So there was technically a style guide, but we were between style guides.
Right.
Also, I got hired, and I didn't have an office. I didn't have a computer. I was on a team, but there were no projects for me. But kind of like you, right? To say, "Come on out, get here at this date." And they weren't
Right.
ready. Ready, hit the
I
ground,
did
ready to
one
run.
I did one page style guides for all of the existing products that we were doing at the time that I was there, that told you here's where this is what you're indenting, this is your typeface, this is the points, so all of this kind of stuff. I'd done this for all of the D&D basic and expert, and advanced D&D and top secret and boot hill and gamma world and all those things, most of which I had written the back cover for like the first or second modules in all of them.
Yeah,
Um, and it worked as long as there were people there to kind of watch over it. But when they started churning up the personnel, then those kind of things would always slip through the cracks. And TSR was a wonderful company, and the people that I worked with I'm friends for life with all of them pretty much. But
yeah.
the management, why the management? Even people that were later my friends in the management, boy, that was like it was like Tiamat coming down, coming down from on high at times, back in the good old
It's
days.
yeah, it's an interesting business case. Heath says he's got to go. Thank you for stopping by, Heath. Have a good
Yeah,
tomorrow. It's already tomorrow where you are, so you're, as you say, in the land of the future. You should have told us what's going to
yeah. Take
happen
care, Heath.
next time you
Yeah,
come.
what's
Tell
happening
us
tomorrow?
tomorrow's lotto numbers.
Uh, Yeah, I see
Um,
Dale mentioning the TSR mini games. Yeah, those were fun. My wife was. We did a live version of They've Invaded Pleasantville when playtesting it at, I think, Mike Carr and Harold Johnson's apartment. And my wife, who had never met anyone from TSR the day we were doing that, this was her meeting for everyone. She was the one that got the alien to play, that was then supposed to meet and infect everyone else in the room. So
it's always a good way to make friends.
it was, and that was the one. Errol Otis had done a beautiful. Uh, it was American Gothic, but with the wife had
Right,
a little
right.
alien antenna coming out. It was and TSR wouldn't use it because American Gothic was suing people because the Grant Woods heirs or someone still held a copyright on it, and Bill Willingham, I think, ended up redoing that cover. I wonder whatever happened to the original. That would be
Mhm.
interesting to know. So
It never got published because I have a memory of seeing that mini game with an American Gothic image on it.
there's a style of it, but the original was never published.
Hmm.
So far as I know, it wasn't published at the time. It made into the catalogs or something. I don't remember. It was a beautiful piece. Errol did this amazing piece for it. It was, and it was a dead-on parody. And no, TSR was always lawyer shy.
Well,
Oh,
it,
and since I
good reason.
mentioned it, I should talk about almost getting fired for writing out the word "and." Among the style guides that no one had, there was the one that should have come from the legal department at TSR but didn't, in which ways you could use the trademark at the time. And this has given me knowledge of trademarks that I use to this day. So no one had told any of us in the creative division that in order for the trademark to be appropriately enforced, you had to use the ampersand in Dungeons and Dragons or D&D for that matter.
Mhm.
And so working on the editorial staff, which again was called production. I don't know if we want to even get into why editorial was production and the people listed as editors or the actual designers. But I wrote the back cover copy for the original Basic and Expert, and everyone was really happy with it. And we sent it to the printer, and the printer printed a whole bunch of them to wrap the boxes in because that's the way it worked back then.
Mm-hmm.
And the sheets came into TSR, and finally someone in upper management saw it, and they came down to the building on Main Street looking to fire people. And the one they wanted to fire was the guy that had written the back cover copy, because you can't use Dungeons and Dragons without the ampersand because that's not our trademark. We've only we're a $1 million company now, but we've only trademarked one version of how you can use our premier game's name. Um, and the only thing that saved me was that no one on the third floor of the creative department, the people producing the games, no one there had ever heard that this was true and that this was the way we had to do it. So happily, Lawrence and Harold and Al and all the rest of my compatriots came to my rescue there, and they're like, "Well, okay, I guess we can't fire you this time, but
Thanks, son.
make sure you're make sure you do it right from now on. Here's your slap on the wrist, Sullivan. Don't do it. Don't do any more bad stuff for us." Um, and the other thing to mention, just so people have some perspective here, I mentioned that nobody on the third floor could touch type except Evan Robinson. We also had exactly one electric typewriter. All the other ones were manual. So I think there were like 4 or 5 total typewriters. So in order to use the electric typewriter, you had to get there first in any given day. And this is the days before typesetting. So everything editorially you wanted to put into a manuscript, you had to type up an insert and then indicate where that was going on the manuscript and that stuff, and it was sent out of house for typesetting. Um, so there was fierce competition to get that, but if Evan wanted to use the electric typewriter, Evan got to use the electric typewriter because he could type.
Right, right.
And the rest of us would then have to move off of the electric typewriter if Evan worked in Devo at the time. And if he wanted to use it, he got to do that. So it was the Wild West, man, and it was a lot of fun, and the people were great.
All right, let's take a quick pause and say this is where the drawing has gotten so far. Not bad for
Yeah,
45 minutes.
that'd be
Uh,
great.
what what do you think? Green? What color should I do for the lizard man?
Well, he's definitely some kind of green. What? Why don't you poll the readers here?
Because they're not artists. I love I love
Okay,
I love the
he's an
viewers.
artist.
I
As an artist,
I'm gonna
as an
go
artist,
for
he would
kind
definitely
of
be shades.
a
I'd probably make him kind of a rich bluish green, maybe.
you know,
Oh, that's not bad. That's kind of. What are you using to do this with, Stan? I'm
I
just
am
curious.
using. Thank you for asking, Steve. I am using an iPad and the app Procreate and an Apple Pencil. This is not sponsored, though Apple and Procreate, I'm totally open to the idea if you want to reach out. But no, this is what I do almost all of my work in these days.
That's awesome. It's
Um,
very cool. It was neat to
thank
watch
you.
it.
Thank you. Yeah, well, that's how I felt, and then I got it. Yeah, trying to
I'd
find
go
the right
greener.
green.
See, I tend to like kind of bright comic booky colors, so I'd probably do something that was relatively 100% yellow, 50 green, 50 blue as a start, and then see how I liked that, and then move on from there. Oh, I did comic books for a while. I did Comic and Dragon magazine called The Twilight Empire Robinson's War, which Dale Donovan was one of the editors of. And I
Dale, who's in
also
our
did.
chat room here.
Yep, yep. That's how Dale and I got to know each other. I was I worked at TSR until 1984, and then I helped start Pace Setter Limited, the original people that did Chill and all sorts of other super cool things like Chill. And when that company went under, I went and started freelancing, and I, despite a couple of soul killing day jobs, I've been freelancing off and on for game and comic companies and whoever else would give me money ever since then. And that included TSR for a long time. Eventually, moving from doing stuff for Dragon Magazine to doing writing novels and that kind
Writing
of stuff. I
novels. All
did.
right. So
I just got
we're
my wonderful. You're not getting any royalties statement this month from, from TSR Hasbro Watsy. So this is why
yeah.
we don't owe you any money.
Oh wow, I did all of this on the wrong layer.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Me too.
It's because you were talking to me.
No, I do this all on my own anyway. I'm really good at drawing on the wrong layer. Um. Ooh, gotta turn that reference back on.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So here I'm looking at this. I'm saying we're getting close to an hour. We got another 10 or more minutes to chat. But here's the thing, Steve. I got so many things I want to talk with you about. I think we're definitely going to have you on again. We're already. I'd like to talk. You just kind of talked about going into the novels and writing it on the novel side. There's one thing. I definitely I specifically want to have you back in about a 6 weeks, if I'm doing my addition correctly, when we're about the time that the comic book ads happened.
Oh yeah, I did those
Because
too.
you know how big a fan I am of those. You were the writer for most of those. Uh,
Yeah, all
so
but the first.
uh,
Yeah,
so
I did those,
uh,
and I moved from the editorial to the art department because of wacky wacky TSR upper management ideas. there's
um,
there's a whole other story there. So I've for most of the a lot of the time I was there, most of the 4 years, I did maps and map graphics and that kind of stuff, and did there was a year or two, there was an overlap where Diesel was not working in the map department and Dave Sutherland was not working in the art department. Where I think I worked on every project TSR put out for 1 or 2 years in the middle of the '80s. Oh, and
yeah.
I was the artist on their video games in the short-lived TSR video game department, and that's some good stories there too. Yeah, I've got stories. I got stories. I know where the bodies are buried.
All right. So let's
Some of
pick
them anyway.
let's pick one of those things. You want to talk about the art department, or do a little bit? Let's talk about novels because that'll segue to us talking about some of what you're doing now.
Okay.
Um, how did you get involved doing novels for TSR?
Just as a short lead up, I had been writing comic books, and it's really hard to pitch comic books and get comic books made. And one of my friends who worked at First Comics had been writing boy detective mysteries. And I found out from him that they were looking for writers. And I thought, oh, I could maybe do that. And I'd written, after I did the Twilight Empire, I actually wrote a sequel to the Twilight Empire, which was in a comic. I wrote it as prose book. And that convinced me I could actually write prose books. It's still not, I published it briefly electronic, but otherwise it's unseen. And so I discovered I could write books and I started writing books. And then TSR was looking for people to write the Legend of the Five Rings samurai fantasy novels. And probably through maybe it might have been Jeff at the time. I heard from one of my TSR friends that they were looking for authors for this and that I should get in touch with this guy named Rob King, who could probably tell me more about it. It turned out ended up being one of the editors of the thing. So they had an open call for people to write samurai fantasy novels. And I wasn't familiar with the game, but like you, I'm a huge fan of Japanese movies, and samurai movies being high upon that list. So they had basically an open competition for authors to write this thing where you sent in a scene for the prospective first novel in the series, and I'd talked to Rob and kind of found out a little bit what they were looking for, and I pitched a hell of a hell of a first scene for the thing, and it's the first scene in the book, and they were like, let's go with this guy. He doesn't. I don't know if you remember the first book in the series is the Scorpion, and the Scorpion, in theory, are the villains of the piece. But my take was not that. My take was that they were actually the heroes of the piece, and everyone else misunderstood them. And, and at one point, Rob said to me as we were working on this series, "You know, Steve, one of the things I like about you is your ability, complete inability to realize that the Scorpions were wrong, that Shoju was wrong." And I said, "They weren't wrong. They just killed the wrong guy." So somewhere that attitude bled through, and that got me the first book, and then I ended up writing. I call it a trilogy. It was the Scorpion, the Phoenix, and then the Lion, which was the last book in the original set. And you wrote the Crab, I think, which was what,
Mm-hmm.
four? So I
Five.
think I wrote
Five.
one, five. Yeah, I wrote one, four, and seven, I think, and
I think that,
worked that worked out well. And I ended up writing Dragonlance books after that. I had been around. I was there when Dragonlance was first created, and Tim Truman and I actually pitched a Dragonlance comic, which you can find the pages from up on my site. And TSR was just not going to do comics. They had people like Tim Truman and me, and obviously Bill Willingham, Jeff D, people that worked in comics. We had Bissett and Toddleben doing toy designs for us at one point, and TSR just would not do comics aside from the ads, despite the fact that the ads were insanely popular and remain. But we're going to talk about that another time.
oh yeah.
That's 1980.
Um, yeah, going back to L5R, I think that's one of the tricks for that whole novel series. For those who haven't read it, each novel is told from the perspective of a different clan in this world, and it tells a grand story of the entire land. But each novel is about a different clan, and in each novel, the belief is that clan was the right clan. Like, they had it right, and I think that you did a great job. You had the toughest job starting with the Scorpion, who clearly are the villains of the piece. I don't care. Just stop it right there. But they don't think so.
I was going to say I've never seen it that way, but I can see how others might.
But
But yes, in the
interestingly,
worldview,
you also write the Lion, right? Lion was the last one,
right,
who are the heroes of the piece.
right, right. And I actually, one of the things I did in that, which won me an Origins Award, by the way, one of the things I did in that was I actually called back to things that the Lion character had learned from the Scorpion character, albeit perhaps inadvertently at the end of the story, which I always thought that was a great little bit conceit, whatever you want to call it. That was something I really enjoyed doing, kind of tying it all up
Yeah.
and with a nice bow. And
No, you did a terrific
it
job on
was
it.
fun. Yeah, we had a lot of good writers on that series. It was you know the fans were hot and cold about it. They loved the Scorpion. I had someone tell me that when she was so mad when she read the climax of the Scorpion because things happen that she threw the book across the room. I was
Right.
like, oh, well, I like that. And and then I heard, though I didn't get a lot of feedback, that people did not like my version of the Phoenix because I did the Phoenix book like a magical kung fu book from from
Right.
Chinese magical kung fu movies, and apparently I don't know, they wanted something dark and grim, and some you know didn't want people jumping around shooting flying guillotines out of their hands or whatever the hell I had them doing. It was like, oh no, that's not what we want. No,
Yeah, one of the there were a lot of challenges to doing an L5R, doing that series of novels. Not the least of which was it had a very devoted fan base that wanted
very
that already knew the storyline and wanted something very specific.
right,
But you also wanted books that would speak to a general audience who sometimes didn't
right,
want some of the things that you had to do uh, because they are part of an established storyline and it's going somewhere and it doesn't feel so good. As you say, to some of the people reading it, they're like, why would you tell this story? And the answer is, well, look at it 30,000 feet and you'll see why.
right.
Um,
Yeah, there was a lot of master outline kind of stuff to work around. Although honestly, I had quite a bit of freedom in it, and especially with the Scorpion,
yeah,
because because they were the villains. No one. It was like, yes, they had definitely had fans, but their fans were not nearly as vociferous in some ways as the fans of the other clans,
right.
and so that I think they were a little more willing to let me run with it. And honestly, what Rob said, the fact that I'd chosen from the very get go that I was not writing a book about villains. I was writing a book about tragic heroes. Right? It was like just they were doing the right thing. They just, honest to God, they killed the wrong person.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like if you killed Churchill instead of Hitler. Right? We should have killed Hitler, but we killed Churchill. Sorry.
Yeah, you would be the villain if you did that.
Yeah, you
Just saying.
would.
Just saying. All right, so let's move into our wrap up phase here. In that we've been talking about the past, and we'll have you on to do that again at least once more over the course of this series. But for a second, let's kind of just the reason we're doing this series is that it's the 50th anniversary of D&D, right? Which is kind of hard to
Right.
believe on its own.
Yeah, no, it blows my mind.
Um, but
It blows my mind that it's 50th anniversary, and I've been playing the game for 47 of those years,
right,
had
right,
experience with
yeah,
it, probably two previous, and then been working on it for, well, it'll be 44 years this fall. So
right, yeah.
that's a
I
lot of the history.
likewise. I've been playing for 45 of the 50 years, somewhere between 45 and 46, and I've been working professionally in games uh, for 40 of them, and on this for 30 of them. So yeah, I mean, we
Yeah.
cover we cover a lot of ground. But it's weird. Like neither one of us is working on D&D directly. Although with the OGL, the Open Game License, and the ability to do third party work, it's still possible to be part of the greater story of D&D. We're
Right.
concerned mostly with what TSR and later Wizards of the Coast, and now Wizards of the Coast, are doing with it. So we're not working on it. We still have friends who interact with it or work on it, um, but it's kind of
Yeah,
kind of weird to
not
look
unless
at.
you count me not unless you count me redoing those ads. So in a sense, I am. But and obviously, we're still in theory under contract, and in theory, they're paying us royalties for D&D or D&D related books that we have, and sometimes they do, which is always nice.
I haven't
But
gotten
yes,
anything outside of a $0. I haven't paid off my advances on things, so I'm
yeah,
a long
welcome
way
to the
from
club.
getting any money out of that.
It's
But
hard to pay off your advances when your book is out of print.
yeah. But what do you think about the fact that D&D is, I don't know, inarguably more popular now than it's ever been, just by sheer volume of numbers? But beyond that, I mean, we didn't talk about it, but you brought up the Satanic Panic, how anti D&D society was, and now it's everywhere. In fact, it is a cultural touchstone. What
Yeah,
uh, do you have any thoughts? And how does that make you feel?
it's really cool and amazing because you know, as you said, it's everywhere now, and we've actually had a really good D&D movie recently, so that's probably even spreading it wider. There's there are this blows my mind. There are people that are making a living playing D&D on YouTube and other sites, and I was like, well, what's that like? And I looked at it and it was like, this is no different than what we were doing close to 50 years ago. Oh my God, we could have been earning money from this. But it kind of blows my mind. And every once in a while, I'll be somewhere with my wife or my kids, and some really obviously D&D influence thing will come up. Honestly think that the fact that D&D helped give us the world we have now. And we'll see something and I'll go, we changed the world because we did. And we changed it, I think, largely, rabid fandom being crazy about things aside. I think generally we changed it for the better. We're in a world of technology and kind of almost magical things that we can do now that are all related to a bunch of people back in the day doing a game about Dungeons and Dragons that then leaked into the computer game industry and into the movie industry, and all these people that are making, decent money doing animated versions of their adventures or movies. All of those people were influenced by the stuff that I helped work on and helped create back in the early 1980s, and ongoing through my freelance work since then. And it's just super cool. It's like, especially since I know most of the people, Arneson was gone by the time I was there, but I know most of the other people that were involved in it at the elemental level. All of the Gygaxes that are still alive are my friends, all of them, right? And that's just like, yeah, I knew that guy. I knew that guy. I knew Gary Gygax. I went swimming at his pool at two different houses, man, and just hung out with him and did work with him and shit. Sorry, I managed to get this far without
That's all right.
swearing, so
All right.
hopefully,
We are not G rated, and it's not like you slipped out a Tarantino style curse. You're good.
it's not like I moved back to Boston, where
Exactly.
the F word is the modifier for every other form of speech. And so it's amazing, and it's just kind of mind-boggling, I mean, and even stuff that I haven't watched, like The Big Bang Theory and stuff, when they were someone someone not into gaming was talking, and they were like, "Hey, we saw The Big Bang Theory, and we thought of you because they were talking about." Sheldon was talking about taking his girlfriend to GaryCon for some reason, right? That he wanted, that was his goal, and they were like, and Kif and I were like, "We were at that con." And after that show came out there at GaryCon, there was a standout of Sheldon, a big stand up life size of Sheldon, and we all took our pictures next to Sheldon at GaryCon that year and stuff. And it's just, yeah, it'd be nice if everyone that ever worked and contributed cool stuff to D&D was super rich. But it's also nice that we are everywhere now, and we have influence on people. And
Yeah.
the New York Times or the Atlantic or the Guardian or newspapers all around the world can talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and of course they still write out "and" in the middle of it. But all over the world, people will use that as a touchstone, and we're like, yeah, me and Stan and a whole bunch of our friends did that. We did that, man.
Yeah.
We changed the world, and I think for
Um,
the better.
so, do you have any thoughts on like Wizards is going to be doing a bunch of celebratory products, and there's going to be a new, not a new edition of D&D coming out this year. Uh, I mean, the whole when we were doing it, or when you were doing it, it was on an up ramp for production. When I came in, it was probably the height of just numerically what was going on. Like we were coming out with 8 to 10 products a month, just for the game, and now it's
Sure.
down again to 4 to 5 products a year, and the type of things. You have any thoughts on what the
Which
future of D&D is going to be like, or what you hope it'll be like?
I hope that D&D will be even easier to play and get into. That it won't have, one of the things we did on Basic and Expert was to try to make it easier for people to get into it without having to have tutors, without having to have your friend teach you, because that was the way all of us learned, right? Back in the
Right,
day. And the closer people can get to that and still be around a table and not be doing computer games, which is nothing against computer games.
right.
We have to talk
It's
about
just
computer
a
games and
different thing.
CSR thing.
Yeah,
Right. And they're very similar, and the computer games are doing a lot of stuff that they learned from D&D. I mean, almost everything that they do is something they learned from D&D or something they learned from the movies. That's great. But my hope is that people will be around tables with each other, or, in like times of pandemic, over the internet, and playing a game that is quick and easy to learn and a lot of fun to play, and anyone could do it. And God forbid we slide back into the satanic panic days, but there are definitely those forces are still afoot in our country and in the world. And
yeah.
book burners are book burners, and they'll never be satisfied. But my hope is that it'll grow and become even more fun for everyone, and that it will still be a social experience and an improv experience, because that's the way it was when it started. And you know as Gary said, I'm pretty sure it was Gary. It might have been Lawrence, but Lawrence doesn't think it was him. And so Gary must have been the one that said to me, "There's two rules, and one is have fun. Two is use dice."
All right.
And the more of that we have, the better. The better, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, so I'm gonna stop with the drawing now. This is where I've gotten. I will finish this drawing offline and post it to, among other places. Is there another time to plug it? The Substack uh, for this show, 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. I will post the drawing when it's done. I'll also post a process video that you'll be, the drawing will magically appear in front of your eyes from sketch to final form. It's a free newsletter with an option for paid subscription. All I'm asking you folks for is to go check out the free version. And, some of you may want to go to the pay. We'll talk about that later. Come and enjoy the free stuff. Uh, in the meanwhile, what have you got going on, Steve? What's going on that people can come and see you doing?
I continue to write just more books than is probably good for me, but and on the verge of releasing perhaps half a dozen or more books this year. In addition to my other projects, the if you're a horror fan, Dr. Cushing's Chamber of Horrors is out, and will hopefully be an audiobook fairly soon. I have an amazing actress who's done literally is in the final phases of finishing up corrections and final tweaks to that. So that's available at Amazon and probably through Audible at the point that happens, but maybe other places too. Uh, I just finished. We just released a new episode of Atomic Tales, which is my science fiction 1950s giant bugs and UFOs story, and that's those run
This,
for free on my site, but they're also in audio form at the end of Christopher R. Mims' uh, podcast that he does every month, and there's links on my Facebook and on my site for that. Uh,
your site
boy,
screen right now, sdsullivan.com.
or StephenDSullivan.com if you can spell my name. Either way, you'll get there.
I I wrote it that way because I figured fewer misspellings. I picked that
Right.
one.
Well, exactly. I mean, that's the trouble with being a Stephen, as you know. There's two different ways to spell it, and people always screw it up. If you're a V, they'll spell it with a PH. If
Yeah.
you're a PH, they'll spell it with a V every chance they get. And of course, Steve is with a V, never with a PH. I had people do that too. So
You know what? You know
sdsullivan.com
what, Steve?
is easy.
It doesn't show that you're an editor.
It doesn't. I come from a line of editors. I'm actually third editor in my family, so father to
All right.
son to
So
son.
you're saying you had the Dr. Cushing's is around, your Atomic Tales, and lots of other things. They can find the links all at sdsullivan.com.
Yep. Monster Shark on a Nude Beach is a serial that's running on Kindle
I've
Vella, and it's
seen the
great.
posters. Monster Shark on a nude beach.
And it's probably going to get a title tweak when it goes into print because people freak out about the word nude in the title. So it's going to be Monster Shark at Buff Beach, probably. But right now, on Amazon, Kindle Vella, you can find that there, or find all of this linked through my far too crowded site.
All right, so I'm gonna say thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining me tonight. And I'm gonna take you offline in a second, do an actual closing. But like I say, let's talk offline and get you back for something when we're talking in the mid '80s, so we can talk the comics again. Um,
Sure.
Talk a little
Oh,
bit about
there's tons.
Sharks on Nude Beach too. Uh,
We
but
could do that. We can do computer games at TSR. We can do all sorts
yeah,
of goodies.
always good talking to you, my friend. If people are looking for Steve, you can find him at his website. You can find him on Facebook. He's super friendly. You should look him up. You should like him and friend him, and you should buy his
And I
books.
have Patreon and coffee too. So if you want to throw money my way, you can do that, or you can join for free. So
All right. So I'm gonna say thank you for coming. I'm gonna come over here and close off this and say thank you everyone who showed up. Got a very long list of visitors, and I am touched by that. I'm not even going to try to remember everyone's names. While you're here, whatever platform you're watching this on, please click the like or the heart or the thumbs up, whatever it is. It it actually really does help me to get the word out to other people who might like the show. Uh, Steve mentioned that he had a Patreon. Hey, guess what? I have a Patreon too. It's uh, less useful if you don't pay. So again, you probably want to start with that Substack I talked about earlier. But if you want to support the things I'm doing, I'm all for that. Come and check me out on Patreon. If all you want to do is see the art I do, you come over to my Instagram, instagram.com/Stanex. And the piece I did today will be up there eventually too. Though the only way to see the video would to be over on the Substack. I'll put that up here to go out. People remember 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. I will be back online tomorrow streaming. Steve mentioned improv, which is a great segue to my other show, which is called Random Encounters. And it's improv cartooning. Each week I do a live stream where we use random encounter tables and dice to randomly select a subject and an activity, and I do a cartoon of that live, kind of like I did uh, with the Lizard Man today. But it's quick sketch, and I finish them, and we do 3 cartoons in a show. It's a lot of fun. You can find the replays on my YouTube channel, which should be linked. It's linked in the show notes, and I'd appreciate it if you gave that a look. Give me a subscription, thumbs up. Again, all the things they say on all the shows. You know why they say I'm on all the shows? Because they work. And they really help. The telling people and giving those likes and leaving comments truly is the best way to help out someone who's doing a show like that. So please do that. If you want to take the next step, come over here to the 50 years in the dungeon.substack.com. It's free. Sign up. You'll get all the details there, and you'll get information showing up in your inbox about what's going on. So, thank you everyone for showing up. Thanks Steve again for being a guest. Steve, I'm seeing here in our private chat, wants me to say, he really does say thank you to you. Apparently you guys were cool, and he showed him a good time, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We'll be back next week for episode 4 of 50 Years in the Dungeon. We'll still be in the 1970s, so we'll see what kind of exciting drawing I do then. Until next week, though, thank you very much. Good gaming, and I'll see you soon. Bye.